So I would use some euphemisms like, Daddy's had a hard day at work today, or Daddy's tired and not feeling very well. I instinctively didn't think it was right to deny it, but I did play it down. So when we first started talking about it, I owned that it was happening, but I kind of played it down. And she gradually became aware that even her love, and he loved her so deeply, was not a strong enough force against the drinker. Hello there, welcome again to Bottled Up Podcast for Families. I'm Lou.
And I'm John, and today we're going to extend a previous podcast where Lou talked about her life with a drinker as the wife. So this time she's going to talk about her life with a drinker as a mother.
Not an easy subject, but
No,
let's
I'm sure it's not an easy subject, and it was quite an emotional one before, and I'm sure this is going to be sort of every bit as emotional. But I think it's also going to be extremely valuable.
Can I just say also before I start that this is my story. This is not my advice or recommendation. If you ask me, should you have left? The answer to that is I don't know. Maybe I should. Sometimes I think maybe I should. Sometimes I'm glad that I didn't. I was there for 29 years, so it was a long time.
Yeah.
But please do not take my story in any way, apply it to yours, particularly as a model. This is what I went through, and Bottled Up is based on the things that I've learned through it.
Yes.
Not the things that I want you to do because I did it. And I have to say that at the beginning.
It's your experience.
Yeah, it's my experience.
It's your experience. The first thing I have to say is, how many kids did you have?
2. I had a boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl.
Yeah.
And was there an age gap between them?
Yeah. My boy was older than the girl by 5 years.
By 5 years. So there's quite a difference in their sort of their ages, which probably made quite a difference in their experience as well.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
But we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, were your kids aware of the drinking?
Well, I was going to say Jacob's earlier childhood, it was nowhere near as bad. By the time Cassia came along, it was more pronounced.
So how long had you been married when Jacob came along?
5 years.
5 years, so okay.
But I think when the children were young, I don't think my husband, I keep trying to avoid his name, but I don't think he drank as much.
Yeah.
He loved the children, and it's such a wonderful thing having children together. But I can still actually remember him weaving down the road with my oldest son in a pushchair drunk. So, quickly my mind is telling me actually this happened quite early on with my son.
Yeah. But were they really aware of the drinking?
Well, the answer to that is yes and no.
Yes.
Kids pick up things we know this now, in the atmosphere. But obviously, bit by bit, they became more and more aware of what's going on. It took them a while to associate their father with a drink in front of them and all the other things that were happening.
Yeah.
So gradually, they became aware.
So did he ever ask you about it, or?
I think when the kids are little, it's much easier to gather them up. Now, what I used to do, and I do, this is something I would say to people, to some extent, I used some white lies because I knew enough as a counsellor, because I was beginning to get training them, that they pick up something and sometimes they personalise it and think it's them. So I would use some euphemisms like, Daddy's had a hard day at work today, or Daddy's tired and not feeling very well. So I would own that Daddy was not happy and then scoop them up and take them away. And they were really accepting of that. They accepted that sometimes their dad went from being, a lovely, big, kind of cuddly pussycat to being a horrible old grumpy bear. And that's kind of, I think I even use those sort of terminologies,
Yeah. And they accepted that.
They did. They did accept it. But gradually they became aware.
Yeah.
And at that point, I instinctively didn't think it was right to deny it, but I did play it down. So when we first started talking about it, I owned that it was happening, but I kind of played it down. And then as they got even older, I recognised that, the secret was out and they could see it happening under their eyes.
So when you say you played it down, how do you mean?
Well, you minimise it. You're doing it to yourself. You're minimising the impact, and you're always thinking, that things are going to get better because you love each other.
Okay.
So in a way, I was inviting them into my denial, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see it that way, but that's kind of what was happening.
Yeah. How do you think it affected the kids?
Well, obviously, it's impacted them very deeply.
Yeah.
Now, being a boy and a girl, then my boy kind of saw it as his duty to protect me as he got older, which at times got really hairy because he would take his dad on and there would be kind of arguments between them. So he would actually be part of the escalation.
Mm-hmm.
But he was doing it to try and protect me, and that's something that...
What age was that?
I think we were going 9, 10, 11 onwards. He was aware that... Because, but again, remember, I was also pushing poking the bear. So kind of, in a way, he probably learned that from me.
Yeah, I mean, these things, it tends to be a bit of a cauldron, and it's everybody's chucking grenades into the
absolutely.
The fire.
So that's how he dealt with it. He left home quite early because it became obvious that the dynamics were not good. So he left home at 16.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter kind of was her dad's little princess.
Right.
They had a very, very deep bond.
Mm-hmm.
So he would protect her to a certain extent. One of the most heartrending parts of my life was at the point where she realised the pain it was causing me.
Mm-hmm.
And because she knew she had such currency with her dad, she really genuinely believed that if I gave it to her, she would be able to fix it.
So she became the rescuer of the family. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, in all other places, her dad would do anything for her.
Yeah.
And so the pain of both, watching my son just going into hostility with his dad, and then my daughter going into disillusionment, because what happened is she began to do all of the pleading, starting with the pleading and then doing some of the anger and everything. And she gradually became aware that even her love, and he loved her so deeply, was not a strong enough force against the drinker.
Yeah, that's a real tragedy.
It was absolutely heartrending.
That sort of sense of futility, the disillusion that you realise that your power doesn't exist, that it just does not work anymore. It's a bit like, you have this magic wand and it's just gone.
But in all other areas too, which is really confusing, it works like magic. I suppose it's the same sort of feeling you feel when your partner's had an affair and suddenly that other person has become... Because people say it's like they're drinking, like they're having an affair, and that other person has more power than you do. And yet it's very hard for her, and absolutely heartrending to watch. It was one of the worst things. And obviously I had to find a way of forgiving, and you forgive not because the person you're with is particularly feeling you're forgivable. You have to learn to do it for you. You have to, otherwise you live in a cauldron of kind of bitterness. But it was much harder to do as a mother than it was as a wife. Absolutely. And I still, to love your children so deeply. And yet, I mean, one of the worst moments of my life as a mother was that I was upstairs. We had a 4-story house, and I was doing some cleaning in the top house, and my son was about 3 or 4 and was playing in the bedroom below, and I could hear him playing. And then suddenly there was a bit of I became aware that he wasn't in his bedroom. So I went to see where he was, and I saw my husband with him in tow, weaving down the path towards the car at the end of the garden. And I could see he was going off to get some booze and taking my son with him. And I ran down and I couldn't get there. And that's why you just ring Faith, sobbing, And I couldn't get my head around how the strong protective streak in him
Yeah.
for his children would go out of the head. Yeah, I mean, out of his consciousness when he was drinking.
Well, this is the problem we talk about with lots of families. How it's unbelievable that this person will do anything for you but that. And then all responsibility goes out the window.
Yeah.
I did it myself.
I remember, ironically, obviously I had to look after my kids all the time, and there was a friend of ours doing some electrical work.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, he's not going to drink when, Pin is here. So I went off to an Al-Anon meeting, actually. And then when I came back, he was roaring drunk. And my son remembered for years that I left him there with his father getting
abandoned
drunk.
him.
Yeah, abandoned him, yeah. Obviously he realises that's not true now, but, these kind of ironies. You have to be on duty all the time, which is very exhausting.
What did they want to happen? Did they ever talk about you leaving him throwing him out, or?
Well, I remember them on quite a few occasions saying, "You're not going to leave him, Mum, are you?"
Who said this? Both of them?
I think they both said it, yeah. I mean, particularly Cassia, I think, because she had such a deep relationship with her dad. And so, no, they used to plead to stay. And it's been interesting watching the impact of it. And they both had therapy for it. But what's been really interesting is they were really polarized. For my older son, his dad was the enemy and he had no relationship. And for my daughter, her dad was still this idolized kind of person. And they both had to go on to journeys of finding the truth. And for my older son, it's recognizing that he wasn't all bad and rekindling some of the good memories. And then what's been quite painful for my daughter is she's had to accept that there were some really bad memories. And it took her a while to do that.
Yeah, so they actually crossed over for a while and then they're going back again.
Yeah. So they've had to find some perspective and some balance around it.
Yeah. I remember when I first came down to Exeter and we just got married and I moved into the house. And at that time, Jacob wasn't living there, but Cassia was, and I felt as if I'd moved into a shrine.
Yes.
There was memorabilia of their dad all around the place, and there was a photograph of him staring at me from the wall, yes. And all the time. It was one of those ones of the eyes following you around the room, and it was always very disapproving, I can assure you, And at that time, it was my dad, all hail my dad. And it's been interesting watching her as an adult, that change. But you're quite right. They were so polarized at that time. Jacob, his dad could do no good. Cassia, no, and then this change. And that has been absolutely fascinating. Is this kind of reality. Dad came down from sainthood back down to being a human, but he also went from being a devil back up to being a human, and everything in between. It has actually been rather fascinating. What's it been like as a mother watching that?
Well, hard. I suppose we're getting to the subject of guilt, aren't we, and shame. You carry that. You're the essence of being a mother is that it's your job to protect your children.
Yeah.
And so not being able to protect them is a very, again, heart-rending walk that you have to go on. And I was abused as a child.
Yes.
So the anguish of not being able to protect my children from this thing that was coming into their lives was more deeply felt because of what I've been through. And it made me very overprotective. I mean, you saw that. I've had to learn to stand back from the protection because when you and I first got together, and generally I'm quite benign and compassionate and merciful. Lovely. If he, quite rightly actually, because I was spoiling my kids to bits, you began to question that. You used to call me the she-wolf.
Yeah.
You still rise. You don't know what my kids have been through.
Yeah, at the time I couldn't understand why this teenager couldn't actually manage to get to the table to pick up her own dinner and take her, and I thought, and she lost the use of her legs. Back and forward all the time, and I dared to mention it.
Yes.
Yes. And this.
These are my children, and you leave them alone.
But this is a tricky one,
Yeah, and that brings you into overcompensation. I mean, yes. My kids got really good at this. They soon figured out, because what we did, once they figured out what was going on, we kind of all banded together. We became the band of brothers. And when he was drinking, either if he was in the middle of the lounge, we would go out, or later he would go upstairs. And we would kind of make that bit really quite nice.
What age were the kids then?
Oh, well, these must have been 14, 15, Jacob, just before he left.
But and it was recognition as well. It wasn't Grumpy Bear. It was
Dad was drinking. And so we all knew that. They soon figured out they could get a game out of me because I'd give them anything. So we'd get the game that I would give them.
That's drinking here.
Yes. Here's the compensation, guilt, assuaging.
Yes. How much has he been drinking?
Yes.
Right, okay. You had another knot at the end of the competition.
A bit like that. It was a bit like that. And I'd have done anything to make them happy. And I have to watch this bit even now because you overcompensate like mad. And you'll do anything for your children to make them happy. So you've got these swings where the one who isn't the drinker is up here still trying to create nirvana and fairy tale as much as she can. And then, you've got the other bit where they're going through all of this stuff with their dad. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, poor kids. That's when they asked me not to leave, but seeing the impact on them, I should have left, I think. These are the circular things that go round.
Why do you think you should have left?
Because of the what they've carried and what they've had to go through. But they didn't want me to at the time. That would have been heartrending for them. So I listened as a mother, and I probably should have made the decision as a wife or mother. I don't know. You can see I'm still confused about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things that we keep saying. There are no right answers to this. There might be a few wrong answers, but there's certainly no right answers. And we do not pontificate and say, you should have done this, you should have done that. You have to make the decision according to the circumstances and according to where you are at that moment in time.
And curiously, I was just thinking, it's just reflecting on the fact that since they've had therapy and are older, I haven't actually asked them, should I have left? I haven't actually asked them that question. It would be an interesting question, wouldn't it?
It would be a very interesting question for you to ask now. Yeah.
But you kind of, you veer away. I think for my journey with my daughter, we actually, for Your Tango, and I think somewhere on our website, me and Cassia began to write.
Yep.
And
that was quite powerful.
Yeah, but she began to open up and say what it was really like for her because she never told me. They both protected me from their own pain. We protected our pain from each other. So she began to tell just about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was it?
About that,
yeah. And it all began to come out. And I remember thinking, I must not react here because it was really hard to read. And I knew if she picked up one bit of reaction, she loved me so much she'd stop telling. And I remember saying to myself, Lou, you must not react here. You must let her speak. And, don't pick up guilt. A, because it's not particularly good for you, but B, if you pick up guilt, she will protect you instantly. So that's a bit of a paradox because she was telling me stuff that made me feel guilty, but it was enormously important to her that I didn't feel guilty, else she'd have closed down.
Yeah, you couldn't react.
Yeah,
you could feel, but you couldn't react.
Yeah. So you end up with this protecting. It was really hard. I think Jacob left home. So with Cassie, we really protected each other. And I didn't realise how deep this was until she went to leave and I cried. I mean, I was in a terrible state for about a month. And I realised that we'd had this kind of bond, me and her against the world, and then she was going off. And, that was so deep, that bond. But these ties that you form, are very deep and very strong. So we all have to learn to function differently as we become more whole.
Yeah, I found it fascinating becoming the stepfather, stepping into this situation, because at that time, all her allegiance was to this dead father.
Mm.
You know, no question about it. There was no vacancies for a father at this point. Thank you very much. My services were no longer were not required in any way.
Mm.
And it was interesting, and I just sort of fine.
Yeah.
That's what
Fortunately, he's a doctor of psychology, and he kind of got it at that point. Yeah.
But it was touching and quite sad watching this sort of disillusion as she started to remember her dad as not this paragon any longer. That she started to see the cracks, and she started to kind of move towards me, and that was very, very touching at the time, and it felt like a very tender moment. And I felt really inadequately prepared for it. I thought, oh, what do I do here? How do I kind of react to this without grossing her out or chasing her off, or just over? I didn't know how to do it, and fortunately, I just sort of sat there and went, fine, and it's sort of it has changed dramatically now. But it was an allegiance to a ghost, and as people often become when they die, a perfect ghost.
Yeah.
All the faults are forgotten and forgiven. Well, maybe not forgiven, but certainly forgotten. It was rather interesting. Jacob, on the other hand, I agree. It's been a fascinating journey, seeing him come from the negative. That's been another fascinating journey. But then that's about him maturing. It's about him taking on responsibility. It's about him being out in the world and realizing, that no, things weren't quite the way I thought they were. It's also you. You have been a rock all the time in the middle of this. You may not have always got it right, but you were always there. And your heart was always open for them. And I think that was so important. It was so important. And they both love you so much now. For a while there was anger at you, and you couldn't do anything right for a short period of time. But that was that adjustment as well. And I think that it was important to allow that adjustment.
Yeah, and that is really true. And unfortunately, we're both therapeutic backgrounds here, and we understand what's going on. But it is interesting to think, didn't pick up guilt for me, but then with my daughter who loved me so dearly, I didn't have, had to make sure I didn't pick up guilt for that, because she would have protected me again. So all these very complex kind of strings that hold us all together.
We've got to remember that, Disney didn't write the screenplay for this. This is real life, and real life is messy.
Yeah.
It's really messy.
Yeah.
And sometimes you look back and think,
I know my son says one of the worst things. He says, that he never knew what dad he was going to get when he came in through the door, and he would walk home from school. I feel sorry for my son, because he was undiagnosed neurodivergent too. He was struggling with a lot of that. It really changed his life when he recognised what was going on, and people began to, treat him with the strengths and weaknesses that we found out. But I think that he got the brunt of it, to be honest with you. I really do.
But I think with that neurodivergence, it's almost like a super tanker. It's very difficult to start to turn that.
Yeah.
Once I get an idea in their head,
that's true.
To say, well, actually, it wasn't quite like that. Well, straight,
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
In his defence, he's done that.
Yeah.
He's done it. And maybe he's still got a bit to go, but then maybe we've all got we've all got a bit to go.
Well, I think I've done a lot of work on my past. Yeah, I mean, actually doing Bottled Up, the book and everything. Therapeutic in a very tough sort of way. But, you can still trigger those memories. I mean, just talking about these things,
Oh,
I feel absolutely shattered at the end of it because I can, there's so many emotions that you go through that I think some of them are still sitting on the bench waiting to be recognised. And,
Is there anything you want to add to this?
I think I would say listen hard to your children. Certainly as your children get older, talk it through with them. What I wouldn't do, and I had to be really careful here, fortunately I had some very good friends, just a small circle of friends, is in some situations the child becomes the reciprocal for all the negative emotions. And then there's a dumping on the child of what you're going through. Get counselling if you're a mum or a dad, and try not to use your children as a strengthener. I did try not to do that because I realised that would make it even worse.
As a strengthener?
Were to help you carry your load.
All right. Okay.
Now they did, to be fair, of their own accord because they loved me.
Yep.
But try and protect them from that. I listened to them and I stayed for them, but actually if I look back and ask them now, they probably would have said, well, Mum, that was just the odd moment. So there's no rules in this.
No.
And I think in this day and age, I would do it differently. I would recognise much early on all the different things that are going on and probably would have bailed out at the point when it was easier for me, when I wasn't a singer-songwriter with a manager and with kids. Then I think every time you add something that's you've more responsibility, he got worse because I think responsibility triggered his inadequacy. So it becomes harder and harder to leave. Yeah. So I think long and hard if you're in a relationship before you bring kids into it, if there's a signal that there's a drinking problem, and even becoming part of your life, because that love that looks really wonderful now has got some real potholes in front of it. And it's a horrible thing to say, but make sure that this stuff is out in the open and you're getting the help that you need before you bring kids into a situation or even get involved. But that's with the benefit of hindsight.
It is. My first wife, at one point I said, she knew I was drinking, there was problems, and I said, let's have a child, that'll, we'll both be responsible. And then she said, no, I think one child in this marriage is enough. And I thought, who's she talking about? So, and looking back on it, she's perfectly right. It would. I was looking at it to solve it. She was looking at the other way around. Yes, if you solve it, then maybe we can go forward. And I think that's good advice at the end of it. She was quite right.
Yeah, and even as I'm talking, I'm thinking about people listening to this, and I'd love to come out with ABC. This is what you do to make sure none of these things happen. But it is really hard to do that.
Yeah.
Except that probably the standards that we live by in this society, I think that these situations are less likely to occur, actually, because in our generation, you were taught that love meant you tolerated a whole load of shit, whether it was your parents or whatever. So I think that what I learned would be translated on a different kind of grid today.
Yeah.
Just want to talk, just because I think it's important for someone who's come and is a mother, but actually has got a child that's drinking. It is very, very, and this is obviously I've not experienced this, but it is really tough, I think, when you've got a child that's drinking. And I think this is happening a lot. Kids are at home. They don't see a lot of hope. They've been through COVID and all of these stuff. And so you have, I think, quite a lot of situations where you've got a kid at home that's beginning to drink. And putting down boundaries at that point is really, really difficult. You have some of these, don't you? You work with some of these situations.
Yeah, with some of these parents, and it is rather difficult. And it's about trying to move away from the authoritarian approach, but still having boundaries and moving towards a more kind of a negotiating approach.
Yeah.
And that can be really quite difficult. For some of them, it's those teenage years where they're rebelling anyway. I couldn't understand how, when I was about 15, you and my father, who I adored, suddenly became an idiot and knew nothing. And that was a revelation to me.
Yes.
It may have something to do with the fact I was 15 and I was the idiot, but it's that kind of attitude at that time, but it's also about the company that they keep and the peer pressure, but it's not just peer pressure. There are two theories to this. One is peer pressure, and the other one's that you select the people that agree with you rather than the pressure from do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is a very difficult one, but if you can negotiate, that makes it easier. The fact that if they are living at home, you can actually set boundaries.
Yeah.
When they're living away,
Yes.
that's a difficult one, an even more difficult one, because any authority that you did have, you now don't have.
If you are listening to this, make sure that you actually check out things like STOP and the 4 Ps and make sure, because would you say that Bottled Up is still usable and applicable to parents with drinking children or children with drinking
I think the
parents?
principles are, I think what I would say about the book is it's not a step-by-step blueprint.
And
what it is a set of guidelines.
Yeah.
This is not a sort of flat pack, recovery pack. You just, A goes into B, screw C. It's not like that.
No, can't be like that. Every situation is completely different.
I would say rather than a flat pack furniture, it's more like Lego.
Yes.
You start to put the bricks together and now, that's interesting. What happened there? I think it's more like that. And
remember to safety. Obviously, I worked very hard to make sure that our house was safe, that the children were safe. So make sure that we'll say this over and over and over again. Safety. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, thank you very much for listening. And see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Please like and subscribe if you like the podcast. And if you like what we're doing, please leave us a good review or even share with somebody else. It helps us reach as many people as possible.